Hello everyone! In this video I'm going to be talking about Pan's Labyrinth, a movie written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, the mind behind other big-name movies such as Hellboy and The Hobbit. I'm going to be giving an overview of the movie as well as a detailed analysis of how the labyrinth and the underworld beyond it can be considered a heterotopia of Crisis, and things that she needs to do to get there can be considered chronotopes. You're probably wondering, what the butt is a heterotopia/chronotope? Well, I'll get back to that. For now, I'll just give you a basic synopsis of the allegorical meaning behind the movie. Note that this is an allegorical overview, so I'm going to be talking about what the plot is meant to represent, not the details of what happens exactly. Pan's Labyrinth is a movie about a girl named Ophelia, and her journey from the materialistic world to the spiritual. Her journey is encouraged and directed by the Faun, a mythical creature and the physical representation of the occult and Ophelia's spiritual guide. The Faun's ultimate goal is to guide Ophelia to the underworld, or in a less literal interpretation, the spiritual plane. In order for her to get there, however, she must undergo 3 tasks set before her by the Faun. Through the ordeals of these tasks, Ophelia will overcome the materialistic and industrialized world that she belongs to, represented by her abusive and cruel stepfather, Captain Vidal. After she does, she can travel to the underworld. The underworld is a place that exists in the same realm as the physical, yet somehow completely separate. It is Ophelia's refuge. It's where she inevitably goes to escape the harsh realities of the world. In that sense, it can be considered a heterotopia. So what exactly is a heterotopia? According to Michael Foucault, the French socialist theorist and philosopher who first coined the term in his publication title, Of Other Spaces, heterotopias are real or imaginary places that exist in relation to our normal, everyday spaces. Basically, that means anywhere that we, as a society, deem to be special in relation to the ordinary. He also further broke it down to say that there are 2 main types of heterotopias of crisis and of deviation. In other words, places that people go to for refuge or are sent to as a punishment. These places are spaces that society think of as special, where there are special rules and traditions, but only within the confines of that space. An example of a heterotopia of crisis could be a church, as people who are having spiritual conflict go to seek guidance and refuge. An example of a heterotopia of deviation would be a jail, a place that we send people who deviate from society's norms. Because Ophelia is seeking refuge from the cruelties of the physical world by traveling to the spiritual, aka the underworld, it can be considered a heterotopia of crisis. She's in crisis, and that's where she goes to seek refuge. It has its own rules and traditions, and exists next to but separately from the world. To better understand why Ophelia is in crisis and why she needs to escape from the real world, we need to take a closer look at this dude. He's Ophelia's recently obtained stepfather. After the recent death of her biological father, her mother gets remarried to Vidal. He's in charge of a Spanish outpost during the Spanish Civil War of 1944 and has been having trouble with rebels in the area. In this story, he's the physical representation of the materialistic world of industrialized Spain, as well as the injustices that led to the breakout of war. Much of who Captain Vidal is as a character is derived from an aspect of his personality, which experts call the Kronos complex. The Kronos complex refers to how people submit to strong power figures without question, rendering them unable to think or act separately and for themselves.
No me obedeció. Es que obedecer por obedecer, así sin pensarlo. Eso solo lo hacen gentes como usted, capitán.
This is exemplified during the dinner scene, where Captain Vidal sits at a table surrounded by a variety of people, including a priest, all of whom submit to his control even though they know what he's doing with the rebels is immoral. Keep that dinner scene in mind, it's going to be popping up again later. Now that we've taken a closer look at why Ophelia needs to escape from the human world, we need to go into detail about how exactly she gets to the spiritual one, which is the underworld. When Ophelia decides she wants to leave the material behind, the Faun, her spiritual guide, tells her of 3 tasks she must complete in order to enter the underworld. Each task embodies a certain part of the human world that she must overcome, and each one must be completed in a certain place at a specific time. Because of these spatial and time limitations, the tasks Ophelia must complete can be considered chronotopes. So chronotopes. In the beginning of the video, I mentioned how the things Ophelia needs to do are chronotopes, and now it's time to explain what that is. First introduced by the Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin in a book he published called The Dialogic Imagination, A chronotope is a kind of specialized heterotopia that's restricted to a specific time and place. A chronotope would include something like a yearly cul-de-sac block party, because it's restricted to a specific place and repeated on a specific date each year. However, something like Halloween or Christmas wouldn't be considered a chronotope, because it's celebrated all over the world. It doesn't follow one of the requirements, which is a specified place. Now, according to the Faun, Ophelia wasn't able to enter the underworld right away because he needed to make sure her spirit was intact. To do this, she has to go through a sort of spiritual boot camp to build her spirit back up. The first step of which is to reset her spirit and a return to innocence. She needs her soul to be healed from the traumas the human world has inflicted upon it. The death of her father, the threat of war, and her mother falling ill. So, the Faun gives her her first task, which is to retrieve a key from the belly of a giant toad who has taken up residence underneath the ancient fig tree. Because of the toad feeding off its roots, the tree has started to die, and it's up to Ophelia to fix this. To get to the toad, she has to enter through the base of the tree and crawl through these nasty, slimy tunnels. This is representative of returning to the womb, or a return to innocence. After the defeat of the toad, there's an awakening, and life begins to return to the tree. The second task builds off of the first one. Ophelia must take the key she got from the toad and unlock a magical door drawn in chalk. Walk through it and retrieve a ceremonial dagger. The trick is that she has to avoid being eaten, basically. I'll explain. The door unlocks a portal to the lair of the Pale Man, a being that is depicted as the Child Eater. The Pale Man is representative of the physical world and the harsh realities of it. Death, starvation, grief, and Ophelia must overcome these things to grow her spirit. The Pale Man is a being that can only interact with the world through the physical, and he doesn't have the capability to see past what's in front of him. This is exemplified by the fact that his eyes must be placed inside of his hands to be able to see. So, he sees with his hands, aka interacting through the physical. The writer and director Guillermo del Toro drew many inspirations for this character from the painting Saturn Devouring His Children by Francisco Goya, and the myth associated with it. The myth is about Titan Kronos. In Greek mythology, he is the greatest of the Titans, and is associated with time, death, and the harvesting of souls. Later on, when Greek myths were appropriated by the Romans, Kronos was renamed to Saturn, hence Goya's naming. In the myth, Titan Kronos is afraid of his children, and that they'll overthrow him when they get older. These children are the more famous Greek gods that media has played up, such as Zeus and Hades. To stop them from overthrowing him, he eats each one after their birth. There are huge parallels between the Pale Man and Captain Vidal, and how they both represent the harsh realities of the materialistic world. In his lair, the Pale Man sits immobilized at a dinner table lush with delicious foods. Do you remember the dinner scene I mentioned with Captain Vidal? Yep, I'm bringing it back full circle. Anyways, back to the food. The food is there as temptation. Temptation to give in to the pleasures of the physical world. Temptation to give in to someone else's power. At that moment, Ophelia is resisting the influences of the Kronos complex. Well, she actually fails. She gives in to temptation and eats a grape, which awakens the Pale Man, who eats a fairy, gets chased, and then gets yelled at and abandoned by the Faun.
¡Habéis fallado! ¡No podéis regresar!
Fue todo un accidente.
¡No podéis regresar!
An all-around bad night for her. However, after the death of her mother, the Faun reappears and offers to help her once more, but she must do exactly what he says, without question. She agrees, after which he gives her the third and final task. On the night of the full moon, she must take her newborn brother into the labyrinth where their Faun awaits. She doesn't know exactly why he wants her brother until she gets there, where the Faun draws the dagger she retrieved for him and tells her that he needs the child's blood. She immediately refuses, holding the child closer. Because she refused, the Faun tells her that she can no longer enter the underworld, and disappears. As soon as he leaves, Captain Vidal appears, as he has been chasing after his newborn child. He takes the child, and shoots Ophelia through the chest. As her blood leaves her body and falls into the labyrinth, she awakes in the underworld. The final task was the ultimate test. Self-sacrifice. Now Ophelia has left her physical body, and has become an immortal in the kingdom of the underworld, where her real parents have been awaiting her return. She's found her heterotopia of crisis, meaning that she's found an escape from the cold and harsh real world, and the people who command power there.